So I will go ahead and open the meeting.
She's on her way.
She's on her way,
Yeah.
yes. All right, good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, February 15th, 2022 special meeting of the school committee. I would like to call the meeting to order and invite those who are present at HCAM to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you all. So the first item on our agenda is an old business item, a carryover from an open meeting law that was, an open meeting law complaint that was filed on January 31st, 2022. Before we start, I just want to provide a timeline for members of the public just to understand the process in terms of where we are. So on January 31st, around 11 a.m., the school committee received a public records request from a member of the public, which also provided notice of an intention to file an open meeting law complaint. At 1 p.m. the same day, I received an open meeting law complaint, which had been filed by another member of the community on the same matter. So in between those correspondence, I had called our town clerk and asked him for some advice, because this is something we've never had to have as a committee, which is, I think, a credit to all of us. So the town clerk and I just talked a little bit about the importance for transparency in how we move forward, so the public could kind of just see what's going on. And then I called Dr. Kavanaugh after that conversation just to convey with her that I had spoken with the town clerk and to request that we speak with our legal counsel just to figure out the process that we legally needed to follow for it. So then on February 1st, Dr. Kavanaugh and I met with Attorney Nancy Campany, who is here with us tonight. And she provided legal advice on how open meeting law complaints are supposed to be handled. And then later that afternoon, she provided the legal script that I read in the last meeting on February 3rd. So on February 3rd, as everybody here knows, we had a school committee meeting. And on Meg's request, we determined that we would do this in open session. So we had an open discussion and we voted unanimously as a committee to authorize Dr. Kavanaugh, along with the assistance of our Human Resources Director, Kim Polnick, to conduct an investigation into the complaint that had been filed. So it's my hope that in transparently sharing the process that we have and the information here tonight, that will put to rest any concerns from the public regarding our compliance with the open meeting law as a committee, and that we'll have taken some steps to rebuild the faith in the process that we use here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kavanaugh to talk about the process that you've undertaken from February 3rd till now.
Thank you. Some of this may be repetitive. So, as Mrs. Kavanaugh indicated, there was a open meeting law complaint filed on January 31st by Lori Nickerson of 13 Bowker Road in Hopkinton. I will read the description of the alleged violation. The alleged violation of open meeting law took place during a Zoom call on January 30th, 2022, organized by Mr. Markey and Ms. Tyler, with a Hopkinton resident, Mr. Christopher Melton, in attendance. The purpose of the Zoom meeting was to discuss and deliberate strategy regarding upcoming school committee business. Neither this Zoom meeting nor the topics had been publicly announced or posted to allow for any public viewing or comment. Mr. Melton went on to post on social media, parenthetically noted Facebook, about the discussions and deliberations that occurred during this meeting. The ethical violations continued when Mr. Markey and Ms. Tyler went so far as to instruct Mr. Melton, a potential school committee candidate in the 2022 election, to solicit emails from Hopkinton residents to be sent to the rest of the school committee to influence votes for the upcoming meeting regarding the mask mandate and school calendar matters. Mr. Markey and Ms. Tyler were quoted as referring to their school committee colleagues as fence sitting on the mask topic specifically. So having received that, as Mrs. Kavanaugh stated, on Tuesday, February 1st, she and I met with Nancy Campany, who's here tonight, our legal counsel, to understand procedurally how this should work. So nothing formally had taken place at this point in time because we really did not understand the procedure for addressing an open meeting law complaint. So what we had learned was that a public body has 14 business days from the date of receipt to review the complainant's allegation, and that either Mrs. Kavanaugh or I would be the person who would conduct this investigation, or perhaps more accurately, we should call it an inquiry. Because the committee had not yet voted on which of us would conduct this inquiry, again, nothing had happened until February 3rd, when the school committee actually had a formal meeting wherein we addressed for the first time publicly, the open meeting law complaint. At the February 3rd, 2022 meeting, the committee voted to deputize the superintendent to conduct the inquiry, which I have done. So I had sought out all digital and electronic correspondence that was made to and from school committee members, Mr. Markey and Ms. Tyler, including but not limited to Hopkinton Public School email, private email, text, and any social media accounts, including but not limited to Facebook, that included the words or topics of masking and/or off-ramping. And so, very willingly, Mr. Markey and Ms. Tyler brought all of that information to the central office, so we had compiled all of those documents. And then our legal counsel also compiled a series of questions, not just for Mr. Markey and for Ms. Tyler, but for all of the school committee members. And again, all school committee members complied and sent back all of the information that had been requested. So all of that information was sent to Attorney Campany on Sunday, February 13th, or yesterday as well on the 14th of February. So at this point in time, she has all of that, and she is prepared to conduct a legal analysis of the information that was sent to her.
Okay. And so that is what happened. Dr. Kavanaugh forwarded to our office the documents and requested an opinion as to whether there was an open meeting law violation, as described in the complaint, and also asked us to draft a potential response to the complainant's complaint. So we reviewed the the documentation that was forwarded and the information that we had regarding the Zoom meeting itself. And after reviewing the complaint, what information we had on the Zoom meeting, one thing that should be made clear is that there is no prohibition in the open meeting law on members of a public body communicating regarding committee business with members of the public. So the fact that there was a meeting held with someone who was not in the school committee is perfectly regular and usual. And in fact, committee members can speak with members of the public at any time. You can strategize with them. You can seek their opinions, information that they have, and that all adds to your service on the committee because it's a collection of information that's relevant. The issue, when an issue arises in that context, it arises with respect to the number of committee members who are engaged in the activity. Because if a quorum of the committee communicates, that is outside of a publicly noticed meeting, publicly posted meeting, then that is when an open meeting law violation occurs. A violation can also occur if you're meeting with a third person and you ask the third person to communicate what you have said or communicate your thoughts to another member on the committee. Okay, so, but the thing that's important to remember here is that discussion among two members, as occurred during this Zoom conversation, that is not an open meeting law violation. So based on the Zoom meeting itself, it doesn't appear in and of itself that there was any open meeting law violation in that. But it did raise the question with the Facebook posting as to whether or not there was a possibility that the school committee members who participated in the Zoom meeting were seeking to communicate with other members of the committee via Facebook by having the citizen post on a Facebook page. And to that, we looked into what the nature was of the Facebook and everybody on the committee's relationship to that Facebook page. In fact, it's clear that it is a closed Facebook page. Therefore, it's not open to members of the public, so school committee members who are not members on that Facebook page would not be able to access it. In addition, we asked all of the committee members whether or not they were in fact members of that Facebook group. No one on the committee is a member of the Facebook group. So and the committee members indicated that they did not intend for Mr. Melton to quote them on Facebook, and that they did not intend to reach other committee members via the Facebook posting. So, and no members of the school committee actually viewed Mr. Melton's posting on Facebook itself. So when the Attorney General reviews these things, and when we do our analysis of whether there's an open meeting law violation, one of the things you do look at is intent. And based on the information we have, there doesn't appear that there was any intent via Facebook to communicate with other members of the school committee. And as a result, looking at the information alone, the Zoom meeting itself and the Facebook posting, those two events together, taken alone, do not constitute a violation of the open meeting law. And it's important to note that those are the only two events, circumstances, or communications which were referenced in the open meeting law complaint. So the open meeting law complaint itself it hasn't established that the actions complained of in the complaint constituted an open meeting law violation, in our opinion. But we do have to note that sometimes the Attorney General the Attorney General has had determinations where they've said, to the extent that an inquiry is made, if other information comes to light that might suggest that there had been deliberations outside of a noticed meeting, then the public body should take steps to remedy those situations. And based on the information that was brought to light during the inquiry, there are some communications that may constitute unintentional deliberations on the school committee outside of a posted meeting. In general, what it is that there might be a communication which had one purpose, and then there was an incidental comment made in addition to the main purpose of the communication, and that results in an inadvertent potential deliberation. So it would be our recommendation that out of an abundance of caution, the school committee make those particular communications public by reading them into the minutes of the meeting, and then they become one of the materials of the meeting afterward. That recommendation is based on an Attorney General determination where that was there. That's their recommendation, is that even though there's never been a complaint filed, that you act proactively and remedy any potential issue that might arise. So that would be our recommendation. The communications that we identified would be brief text message communication between two committee members, email messages that included two committee members, only one of whom was actually one of the other two members, okay? So that's how you got the third one in. One of those two people communicated with a third member. But it's regarding not the specifics of the first conversation, but just regarding the same general topic. So it wasn't a communication of, this is what I said to the other committee member at this other meeting, and now I'm saying it to you. It was just about the general topic. And we would also suggest that the committee members whose conversation was oral, so there's no written documentation of it, that they might provide a summary of the conversation, so that could also be revealed. And that way, all of the information that was revealed in these communications that happened outside of a posted meeting become matter of record in a posted meeting, and any potential issue with the open meeting law is thereby cured. I would point out that these possible deliberations, they all appeared on our review to be quite unintentional, and we think that they probably arose out of a lack of familiarity with the details of the Attorney General's interpretation of the open meeting law, which I must say becomes more and more detailed every day. Okay? And one thing you might want to consider is, in that situation, many public bodies, at the same time that they, in order to complete what they consider to be the remedy for the unintentional violation, they also offer to their members an opportunity to develop a greater understanding of the open meeting law, either by having counsel provide a legal opinion on particular issues, or a training in person or virtually, or via training with the Attorney General's office, because the Attorney General's office does offer open meeting law trainings. Because these are issues that are very specialized and detailed, you might not they might not be covered in great detail in an Attorney General training. Because when you do the Attorney General training, they're covering the entire open meeting law, from why you go into an executive session, from soup to nuts, essentially. Whereas this seems to me more an issue of maybe not fully understanding what constitutes a procedural communication, which is perfectly fine among multiple members of the committee, and how it's so easy to just cross that line into an unintentional comment that would reveal someone's opinion on an issue or reveal information that you thought should be considered, which then becomes a deliberation without ever intending to be a deliberation. And so that's up to the school committee to decide that. So the way we see it after this report, and of course, if you have questions, we'll answer any questions, but the school committee needs to decide whether they want to go ahead and remedy these possible deliberations, whether you want to offer training or information to school committee members with respect to electronic communications and serial communications, and the intricacies of procedural versus crossing the line over into substantive communications. And then we also have drafted a potential response from you to the complainant with a cover letter to the Attorney General, which is what you do have to provide. And you will need to either go through that response and decide what you want to use of it, what you don't want to use of it, or if you want to send it the way it is, or you'll have to create your own response, and you need to do that by Thursday. Okay?
Thank you. Thoughts from?
Thank you. I had the pleasure of having a couple of calls with Attorney Campany starting late this week, or late last week. And I don't envy her job working in open meeting law. It's a real minefield, but I appreciate her expertise and thank her for the work on behalf of the committee.
Agree.
And I think it sounds great to do a training on OML. I mean, why not? Especially if it's changing in its details all the time from the Attorney General's office, which makes me very nervous.
Me too.
I think we should do that training promptly.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a good plan. I don't know to whom we would turn for such a training, who you guys think would be the most effective trainer.
Whoever the legal counsel recommends.
Yeah, so we could bring that back to make a determination from a list of individuals that are recommended.
Yep.
But I
Sounds
agree, I
good.
think it would be great for all of us to have that training and to see what the latest stuff is. It is detailed, and even from the training we get at the beginning, it's not as nuanced what we're getting in the training as school committee members that we receive versus what is the very nuanced law. So.
I would say further, to alleviate any awkward position you may feel that you're in, I would volunteer that we remedy any possible, out of an abundance of caution, that some of the emails that were discovered as part of the collection that were outside the scope of the open meeting law complaint, but that raised questions for our attorney as possible areas of concern, that especially since they were just disclosed, that we read them out loud, thereby making them public record. In addition, I would volunteer to read a summary of the conversation I had with the citizen that was mentioned as well.
Yeah, me too.
I think that all sounds good. I appreciate, I think this has been awkward
Yep.
for everybody, and I appreciate that one of the things that as a committee we have always put forward as a priority is transparency, and I think it's great that we're able to, in spite of the awkwardness, bring this back to where our core values have been. Do you have the, does this require a motion, I would think, as well, and a vote, or is that just by consensus?
Well, if you want to, the proposed response does require a vote.
Okay, so I have
And
not seen that.
The proposed
Everybody has-
response also references in it that the committee has decided to make public the communications that, out of an abundance of caution. And so if you go through the letter, you decide on the letter, and you vote on the letter, then you can move on to reading the communications. This is actually 2 copies of the communications. I have maybe six copies of the draft of the letter, and 7 copies of the
Okay.
draft of the letter, if you want to go through it.
Yeah.
I didn't know if Carol.
Are we to read it now and vote now?
You should,
Yeah,
well,
yeah, yeah.
otherwise you'll
Yes.
be happy to do it at another meeting
Yeah, pass it around. Let's see
this
it.
week.
Yeah, yeah. No more meetings.
So the first one is the letter to the complainant, and the second one
Thank
is
you.
the cover letter to the Attorney General's office, which is really nothing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just like me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I don't have a
Oh,
problem.
you can take it.
Do you have another
I
copy
have
on
one.
your?
Yep, I got it.
Here, I'll take yours.
I can fish one out of this.
I had some Carol one, but I don't have one computer.
Oh, should we be reading it out loud for the public, or is it too long? Did you
Well,
want to
if-
read it, or no?
Once you vote on it, it will become a material at the meeting, and it will be a public record. So it's up to you to decide whether to read as you go along. But if you decide to do edits, the public will hear the edits anyway.
All right. In the 3rd paragraph on the 1st page, in the 2nd line, the word "that" is repeated.
I noticed that too.
Oh, I caught one other
You
typo
always
earlier.
catch one more every time you read it. Okay.
Sorry.
It looks good to
It
me.
looks good to me as well. And do we have copies of the materials referenced to be entered into the public
I
record
have-
here tonight?
What I have was not copies to give to everyone.
No, but
one,
the-
Will
two
you be reading
copies
them?
total. So
Sorry.
anyone, you can have anyone read them in. You may want to vote to adopt this as the response. And then if you do that, then you may want to go ahead then also and vote to read in the applicable conversations at this meeting, pursuant to the response letter.
So should I make a motion to
On this letter?
Okay, so
this letter?
the first motion,
Thank you.
do you want to make the motion?
Sure.
Pass that down to you to let you read the whole thing.
You just have to put it, I move to.
I move to respond to the open meeting law complaint of Lori Nickerson by sending a response to the complainant in the form submitted as revised at this meeting and forwarding the same with enclosures to the Attorney General's office, and to authorize the superintendent or chair to sign such response in the cover letter to the Attorney General's office on behalf of the committee.
Okay, so motion by
Second.
Meg, second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that is unanimous. Thank you very much for the body of work that went into this from both of you. And then the other piece is a motion to read into the record at tonight's meeting the communications referenced in the letter that we just moved. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Meg, a second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So it is unanimous as well. We will read those in. At the committee's pleasure, would we like to ask Attorney Campany to read that since you are in possession of it?
Okay, I'm going to start with one email string, so I'm going to start from the back because that's the first one. Okay. And
I'll be happy to read mine if it helps. The one about page
Okay.
6.
Okay, so on January 26, 2002, Joe Markey wrote, "Hi Nancy," to Nancy Kavanaugh. "Hi Nancy, I'd like to make sure we get mask off ramping on the agenda for the December 3 school committee meeting." And that followed that up immediately with another email that said, "Ha, of course I meant for the February 3rd, 2022 school committee meeting. Thank you." And then there's a response from the chair saying, "Hi Joe, I apologize for the delayed response. I've redacted a small portion. It was a personal matter of an intimate personal detail. Yes, I will make sure off-ramping gets on the agenda for February 3. Enjoy the snow this weekend, Nancy." Then there's a follow-up one from Joe Markey on January 30th stating, "Hi Nancy, I just took a look at the agenda and noticed that the agenda item is mask off ramping options - Dr. Kavanaugh. Since I will be making a motion to off-ramp at the high school and other schools, the agenda item should be changed to, quote, vote on mask off-ramping, end quote. A reminder that DESI's waiver of the mask requirement is based on vaccination rates, not case counts or any other metrics. Joe Markey." And then a reply email from Nancy Kavanaugh. "Thanks, Joe. Given that our agenda has not yet been posted publicly, I've been curious by the coordinated effort of people who already knew this was something coming before the committee for a vote. I will have the agenda edited to allow room for a motion. There are obviously a number of different motions that could come from this discussion, and I was not intending to curtail anyone's ability to make a motion. It is always my hope, in the spirit of the open meeting law, that motions and votes in public session take into consideration the discussion wherever it may lead." Smiley face emoji. And then in this conversation, a final one from Mr. Markey. Back to Nancy Kavanaugh. Hi Nancy. Yes, after receiving confirmation from you Thursday last week that it would be added to the agenda, I did mention it to a few people as a fact that we would have an agenda topic on mask off-ramping February 3. As for the high level of community interest, I interpret it as perhaps driven by recent shift in national publications like The Atlantic, NPR, and New York Times last week, now all taking a more critical stance on masking in schools. Plus, several people have asked me about Cohasset's experience, as that also drove some attention to the topic last week. As for my request for agenda wording change before it gets posted, since we've prevented votes before in cases where the agenda didn't mention there would be a vote, for example, day 6 testing at January 20th meeting, close parenthesis, I feel it's important to request that the wording update for the February 3 meeting agenda. So that's one set of communications. Another set is a
I'm sorry, for all of our education, can you just remind us, that is a document that was collected not pertaining to the scope of the OML complaint, but raised questions for you because I stated some things in there beyond agenda.
Right, and it came up because the school server search of emails that had the word masking in them from you.
I provided that email, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
yeah.
okay. Then the next one is a text message communication, and it's between Meg Tyler and Joe Markey, and it was provided by both of them. They look a little different, but they're exactly the same. This one printed on one page, which is why it's the one I used. All right, and so it's on January 29th, Saturday at 3:03. Meg has, what I gather is a link to an article that says, after 2 years, growing calls to take masks off children in school by npr.org. Is that a link?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And Joe responds, have you noticed MASC doesn't pick up these stories? How do we make sure everyone is seeing this and activate letter writing in Hopkinton? And Meg replies, there was a group in the fall who started a change.org petition, and I thought they had an FB group, but I don't know what they are called. Joe replies, Chris Melton's group maybe. We need to get people off Facebook and into meetings. And Meg responds, maybe Chris can ignite folks to write letters. Joe says, I'll reach out to him and a couple others. Meg writes, in parentheses, have him write in favor of secular calendars to smiley emoji face. Has glasses on, I think, though, right? Okay. I do not do emojis, okay, so I don't know. My kids send me them, I never know what they mean. Then Meg says again, I'll reach out to Marissa Jones. Well, I guess actually there's a thumbs up first from Joe. And then Meg writes, I'll reach out to Marissa Jones. She collected hundreds of signatures for getting back into school, FT.
That was the thumbs up to that.
Oh, okay, okay. Then the next day, on Sunday, January 30th, Joe writes, have a sec or a minute. Meg says, might even have more than a minute, give a call. And then Joe provides a link to a letter to the editor about adding holidays to school calendar can put strain on families. Then about 20 minutes later, Meg writes back, great letter. And then 3 minutes later, Joe provides a link to a Zoom meeting, the topic of which is masks in schools. And it provides the address, etc. All right, then the last set of communications that I have before we get to the summaries of the conversations was an email from Joe Markey to Nancy Kavanaugh, Lisa Whittemore, Regina Miloslavsky, olddrj@gmail.com, Norm Kamalo, CC to Carol Kavanaugh, and Sean McAuliffe. Good morning. This is on January 7th, 2022. Good morning. I am writing as a parent and taxpayer with concern that a portion of the COVID update announced to the school committee and public last night may expose the school district, the town, and its committees to legal liability, as it may establish a practice that goes above and beyond any reasonable measures, parentheses, CDC, DPH, DESI, close parentheses, may create a standard more restrictive than neighboring communities and may deny children their constitutional right to education. At the January 6, 2022 meeting of the Hopkinton School Committee, The committee and public were informed of a practice that beginning Monday will require a day 6 rapid antigen test in order to return to school after 5 days of isolation following a positive COVID test. Under the practice, in the event of a positive COVID test on day 6, individuals would continue to isolate through the 10th day following the initial positive test. The update is pasted below and contrasts with DESE, DPH, and CDC as follows. Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, FAQ on repeat testing. Does the DESE DPH guidance recommend that individuals who have tested positive for COVID-19 take another test before returning to school after the 5-day isolation period? No. The DESE DPH guidance does not recommend repeat testing prior to returning to school, so long as individuals are asymptomatic and/or their symptoms are improving. Individuals must mask when around others for an additional 5 days after the isolation period. Massachusetts Department of Public Health, DPH. If you test positive for COVID-19, in parenthesis, isolate, close parenthesis, everyone, regardless of vaccination status. Stay home for 5 days. If you have no symptoms or your symptoms are resolving after 5 days, you can leave your house. Continue to wear a mask around others for 5 additional days. U.S. Center for Disease Control, CDC. On January 4, CDC updated COVID-19 isolation and quarantine recommendations with shorter isolation, open parenthesis, for asymptomatic and mildly ill people, close parenthesis, and quarantine periods of 5 days to focus on the period when a person is most infectious, followed by continued masking for an additional 5 days. Another bullet, CDC Director Rachel Walensky, quote, said rapid tests were meant to diagnose infection, not predict the risk of spreading it. A position echoed by the FDA, which regulates the tests. They are not authorized for that use. They haven't been studied for that, Dr. Walensky said. And then there's a link to a New York Times article, January 6, 2022. Practice announced at Hopkinton School Committee, January 6, 2022. From Monday onward, rapid antigen testing will be available for people who have reached day 6. If negative, the person remains in school. If positive, the person continues quarantine until day 10. And now this is back then to Joe's comments. In light of these inconsistencies, I respectfully request further review to examine potential legal liability to the town and school district. And then there is a response from Lisa Whittemore to all of she responded to all. Hi, Joe. Thanks for reaching out to all of us. We are scheduling a joint committee of the BOH and the school committee, and we'll discuss these concerns at that meeting. Best, Lisa. And then Joe back to everyone, but really to Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. Respectfully, I would request further examination of potential legal liability ahead of that time as the practice goes into effect Monday. And then, from Nancy Kavanaugh, responding to that, to Joe, but just to Joe, not replying to all. Thank you, Joe, for copying me on the email. I think a joint meeting with the Board of Health, as you suggested last night, would be appropriate for us to schedule as a school committee. I tried to call you on my way to work earlier, but was not able to reach you. Just for clarity, are you aware of any planned potential litigation against the town or district, or are you expressing this out of an abundance of caution and concern that there might be some exposure? If there is specific litigation of which you are aware, are you able to share anything more specific? I ask this in your capacity as both a parent and a school committee member, as if there is planned litigation of which you are aware, the school committee should be meeting with our attorney to discuss this. Best regards, Nancy. And that one from Nancy was January 7th. And in fact, they were all January 7th. But there was a reference to last night's meeting, which is, I don't know why I clarified that. And those are the communications that came to light during the inquiry that we thought, when taken together and in addition to the summaries that you may be reading, could potentially create an issue with the open meeting law. Constitute for the board.
But no longer, because they're part of the public record now, correct?
Correct.
Right.
We have cured out of the abundance of caution the issue.
That's right. No more emails, no more communication, no awful.
Send up flares.
Yep.
But to complete the cure, you still need to.
Can you ask me what I'm supposed to do? What do you want next?
Well, you're going to provide the summary of the conversations that you had with the school committee member and/or
Okay,
in the presence of the school committee member.
okay. All right, I'll start, if that's all right, Meg?
Yes, please.
All right, so I'm gonna, for everyone, review what I talked about in the meeting that was the question of the open meeting law complaint. The conversation in question focused on perceptions of the current level of public sentiment on masking in schools, nationally, statewide, and locally, and encouraging people who have opinions to write letters instead of just venting on social media. I had invited several citizens, but as it turned out, only Meg and one other person I had invited were on the call. After friendly introductions and talking about sledding, the citizen shared that many people have been signing his nomination papers. I asked what kind of sense he's getting from people about issues so far. He shared stories to describe situations he's hearing about from people related to masks in schools. I gathered this from his response in stories. People are afraid to speak up. They feel just as passionate about making masks optional in school as they did in the fall, but there has been shaming on social media for people expressing that view. People feel threatened, bullied, and silenced. They have personally or seen others put at odds with their neighbors due to comments on social media. People consider it risky to speak up and stick their neck out. This matched what my wife had told me too in a conversation that Saturday morning about Facebook. I suggested that this dynamic may explain the drop in volume of emails received on the topic, at a time when one might expect increased emails due to rapidly dropping case rates that I heard of from the health director in 3 meetings the prior week, the 95% plus vaccination rate in all school age groups 5 and above, and an apparent shift in public opinion nationally as evidenced by content appearing the final week of January in The Atlantic, New York Times, Washington Post, and NPR, all now shifting 180 degrees to challenge masks in schools, partly driven by newly available data. We discussed the difficulty of the current polarized views on masking, the deterioration of social norms in town from reduced social opportunities for citizens, and the divisions caused. I offered the advice I have offered many civically active citizens over the years. If you want to generate data that creates ad revenue for Facebook, vent and argue there. If you want to make a difference in your town, get off of Facebook and into public meetings. 2 basic ways to do that are to attend meetings and write letters. I pointed out that unless people on committees hear otherwise from citizens, many committees are inclined to hold the status quo. I suggested that if people have opinions on masks in schools, they should write to the school committee. I encouraged him to publicly share that advice of civic engagement with others. I encouraged him and others not to give up writing letters because of resistance and bullying tactics on social media, and offered the encouragement that writing letters to local boards and committees does make a difference. We parted with some friendly comments. I respect the open meeting law process. Every citizen has the right to request inspection of government activities. I've responded completely and cooperated actively, as I'm sure others on the committee have as well. Any experienced volunteer knows to retain humility in the midst of legal complexities and ambiguities of open meeting law. I don't respect that some members of our community who disagree with others' opinions are slipping into incivility. Some would depersonalize and cast aspersions on the character of others as a weapon to attempt to silence those with whom they disagree, or make examples of one in order to silence others. This has consequences. For example, a committee member seeing another committee member confronted with untrue statements and unfair assessments, may fear speaking up on an important budget or school issue out of fear for being treated similarly. The town suffers. Fortunately, I have courage and fortitude that allow me to continue to speak up for what I think is right for our students, teachers, and schools, while others engage in what I consider to be petty behavior. What inspires me is that I may inspire others to stand up as well, because we become a stronger community and our government runs better when they do. To those who promote incivility in any form, I offer no harsh words, no petty retribution, only an invitation to participate more constructively in the civic process. Thank you.
I will be brief
Okay.
because Joe has covered a lot of ground. So, what happened? On Sunday afternoon, January 30th, at around 1:30 p.m., I was preparing for a class the next day on Nietzsche and herd mentality, when Joe telephoned to say that he was going to have a group chat with the Cohasset School Committee chair and some other folks whose names I don't recall, about state and nationwide COVID-related school challenges. We thought this would be okay. We checked in with each other because it wasn't a quorum. It was just the two of us talking to these people. It was informational. And as everybody knows, part of what our school committee norms consist of are to listen and to get feedback from the public. At 3 p.m., I logged on and I saw Joe and a resident. The resident was busy sledding with his family at the time. Joe apologized that the other people he had invited couldn't make it. Because I'd never met this resident before, this was mostly a get-to-know-you chat for me. He has emailed the school committee a number of times, and his emails are always articulate and cordial, which makes for a nice change sometimes. We listened to the resident as he shared anecdotes about getting nomination papers signed and about conversations he recently had with people and children about masks. We encouraged him and others who had thoughts to write to the school committee. We had not had much public response recently. The public forum we had held in the meeting just before that had not had a single participant. There was some twittering on Facebook, but I don't think that's a reliable source of information. Our chat was casual. We joked a bit. I quipped, probably unsuccessfully. Kids showed up on different screens, and then we logged off. I could say more, but I feel like Joe has absolutely covered it. And, I would just ask us to be all more careful going forward about using social media and believing what we read on social media without consulting the sources themselves, because in my estimation, some Facebook posts were read and copied, and then all of a sudden we were publicly condemned and harangued, and the inquiry had not even begun yet, and I think that was very hurtful for both of us. I would also ask us to consider in the future having an absolute moratorium on school committee members using Facebook, because there are problems when there are these private interest groups to which a few of us might belong, and there's a posting, and even if one or two respond in an innocuous, seemingly neutral manner, I think that constitutes something we need to be watchful for. So this is just a suggestion for the future for us all to be more careful about our use and to be more thoughtful about our committee members and their reputations. Thank you.
Any comments, questions, kind of where we're going from here?
I just want to say thank you to everybody for this process. I mean, we all join boards and commissions and we get trained, and we're human beings. And I mean, the training that we had in open meeting law was quite a while ago, and I think, we all do the best we can, and in this case, we upheld all of open meeting law, so I think that's great. But I think this process has been very transparent, and I thank you for that. for community members who are curious, for the community member who raised the concern. I'm happy that they can see that this was investigated thoroughly and we were doing what we can do, which is talk to community members, and I'm thankful for my colleagues who shared their information freely, and I'm just glad to see this put to bed. But I'm happy that there is a process, that we can exercise this process in public, and this is what open bodies do when something comes up. And I think this has been well run, and I just want to thank everybody. I was a bit on the outskirts of it this time, thankfully, but I'm encouraged to see that the process exists and that we can exercise this process openly. So, thank you to everybody.
So, I would echo all of what you said. The other piece I will offer out, which I hope will be helpful for us all moving forward. I think getting over this hurdle tonight and then able to move into Thursday is a great step for the business, the important business that we have to move forward with. I also would like to offer that I had reached out to Tony Bent, who is a former superintendent and a former school committee member, who does a lot of consultancy with school committees, and talked about him potentially working with us kind of on moving forward from this point. He would work with us each individually so that he wouldn't have any one lens to look at this and then potentially need to do a workshop with all of us. We don't have to make a decision on that tonight, but I had thought it might be helpful for us to have somebody from the outside to come in to talk with us to kind of look at kind of how we move forward.
I think that I am grateful that this was such a smooth, carefully run process. I think it has really opened up my eyes to interpretations of OML, because in the process of this, I spoke to some of my select board friends, asking them questions, and found out that their structure is much more rigid, right, around OML, and so I didn't know what to think. What is really OML? What isn't? Where are the edges of it? Like, it started to suddenly become very murky, where I thought I had kind of a handle on it. So I'm really looking forward to getting some clearer training, better guidance, and knowing what the edges of the whole thing are.
Okay. So if there's nothing more on this matter in particular, I would seek a motion, just to check in, there is nothing more. I would seek a motion to enter into executive session to comply with or act under the authority of MGLC 30A 21A3, specific to conducting strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with the Hopkinton Teachers Association, because having the discussion in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the school committee's bargaining position, and then to adjourn the meeting at the end of our executive session.
So moved.
Motion by Meg, is it second?
Second.
Second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we are entering into executive session at 7:53. Thank you all for tuning in tonight, and have a good night. Joe,
Aye.
Meg,
Yes.
Amanda. I am also an aye, and it is, we are adjourned at 7:54 into executive session, and thank you for that, Amanda.
Thank you,
And thank you for coming.
very much. Thank you for all your help.
For coming out on a bitterly cold night.